Okay, so today we're going to dive into a grape that you found some really interesting stuff on.
Yeah,
Traminer.
Traminer.
Yeah. And you've given me all this information about it from like its ancient origins all the way to how it's viewed like on wine lists
Yeah.
today. And we're going to try and just figure out what makes it so special.
Yeah, I mean, you've given me like a lot of good stuff here, and I think we can really get to the heart of what makes this grape so captivating, I guess, for, your average wine drinker all the way up to like a sommelier,
Yeah.
So I think it'll be good.
Yeah, cool. So um, let's just start at the beginning
Okay.
with its origin. So like, where does it come from?
Yep.
What do we know about that?
So the sources that you've given me all point to this region in northern Italy called the South Tyrol.
Okay.
And there's this village there called Tremen.
Right.
And it seems like that's likely where this grape originated.
Really, and it's named after the village.
Yeah, like it's a direct link, right? The name itself kind of, refers back to that village, and that's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
And then, like, looking back even further, it seems like, there's a possibility that it could even be connected to, like, these ancient Roman vines called Radic vines.
Really?
So that would be quite a lineage.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it started there, but it didn't just stay there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It didn't just kind of hang out in that one spot over the centuries. It actually like embarked on this pretty amazing journey across Europe.
Okay.
When you think about it, like a lot of wine grapes have these really cool migration stories. They spread out, they adapt to new environments.
Yeah.
And Traminer is no exception to that.
Cool.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of moving around, I think, when people think of Traminer, the first thing that probably pops into their head is
Gewürztraminer.
Gewürztraminer, exactly.
Yeah.
And that really took off in the Alsace region of France.
Yeah.
And, that word Gewürz actually means spice in German. So right there in the name, you kind of get a hint of like how its aroma profile evolved, in this new region.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like it went to Alsace and like developed this bolder, more expressive personality.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Wow.
it was like I'm in Alsace now. I'm going to be spicy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's really important to keep in mind that Gewürztraminer is kind of like this, regional expression of Traminer.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's one specific way that this grape presents itself, but it's not the whole story, right?
Yeah.
Like the original Traminer still exists.
Right.
And it often has like a slightly different, aroma and structure.
Okay, cool. So it went from Italy to France.
Yeah.
And then it just kept going, right?
Yeah, it did. So from there, it also found a home in Germany. And then, later on, it actually made its way all the way to the New World.
Wow.
So it popped up in places like Australia and New Zealand and even parts of North America.
Okay. And those are all places with like kind of similar climates, right?
Yeah, they all tend to have like these cool to moderate climates,
Okay.
which is really interesting because it speaks to like this adaptability of the grape.
Yeah.
It's not like super picky, but it definitely has preferences.
Okay.
And I think that kind of sets the stage for like understanding how the environment and the place where it's grown, which we call terroir,
Right.
how that really influences what you end up tasting in the glass.
Okay. So let's talk about terroir then,
Okay.
because it sounds like Traminer is really, really sensitive to its environment.
It is incredibly sensitive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, the place where it's grown, the climate, the soil, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It really leaves its mark on the wine.
So what are some of the things that you might actually notice when you're like tasting a Traminer from different places?
Okay, so like let's say you're tasting a Traminer from a cooler climate.
Okay.
So think like Alsace or South Tyrol or even New Zealand. In these places, the grapes, they ripen a lot slower, right? And because of that, they retain higher levels of acidity.
Okay.
So you end up with wines that are usually drier.
Okay.
And they often have these really delicate aromas, like you might get white fruits,
Okay.
maybe some floral notes like jasmine or orange blossom.
Yeah.
And then maybe like some subtle spice nuances,
Yeah.
like ginger or white pepper.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this delicate, refined profile.
Got it. Okay. So that's the cool climate.
Right.
Now, what about warmer climates?
Okay, so if we shift gears and we think about warmer places like parts of Australia or California or South Africa,
Yeah.
things change quite a bit.
Okay.
Because in those warmer areas, the grapes, they ripen much faster.
Okay.
So what happens is you end up with wines that are richer
Okay.
and they naturally have lower acidity.
Okay.
And the aromas also, they become a lot more pronounced.
Interesting.
So you might get like tropical fruits like lychee, mango, passion fruit.
Okay.
And then the floral aromas, they also become more intense. So you
Yeah.
might get like rose or lily.
So it's almost like you're talking about two totally different grapes.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the same grape, but it expresses itself in such different ways.
Totally.
And then it's not just about temperature either, right? The
Yeah.
soil also plays a huge role.
Yeah. So we've got the climate and then we've got the soil.
Yeah, so
So-
like for example, limestone can really enhance this sense of minerality in the wine.
Okay.
And then, volcanic soils, those can sometimes give you these really cool smoky notes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then clay soils can contribute to a fuller body and a richer texture.
Wow. So it's like all of these things are coming together to make these really complex wines.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? Like
Yeah.
you have these subtle differences in the geology,
Yeah.
and that actually affects like the chemical makeup of the grapes as they're growing,
Wow.
which then impacts like, the aromas, the flavors, the
Mhm.
texture, like the whole thing.
And then on top of that, you've got the winemaker
Yeah, exactly.
who's making all sorts of decisions.
That further impact the wine.
It's like this beautiful interplay between like what nature gives you and then what the winemaker does with it.
Totally.
It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so let's move on to like what we actually experience when we taste Traminer.
Okay.
So I guess the first thing that we should talk about is the aroma.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that everyone agrees on about Traminer, it's that it's incredibly aromatic.
Yeah.
Like it's just got this powerful, expressive aroma profile.
So what are some of the like classic aromas that you would expect to find in a Traminer?
So you almost always get lychees and rose petals.
Okay.
Like those are like the hallmark aromas.
Got it.
And then ginger is also super common.
Okay.
And then depending on where it's grown and like how ripe the grapes were at harvest, you might also get some of those like tropical fruit aromas.
Okay.
Yeah. So it can be really quite a vibrant bouquet.
Cool. Okay. So we smell it and we get all these crazy aromas.
Right.
What about when we actually taste it? Yeah. So usually what happens is those aromas that you smell, they actually carry through onto the palate. So you'll actually taste those same things.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then in terms of texture, it can vary quite a bit.
Okay.
You might get something that's like medium bodied,
Okay.
or you might get something that's much fuller and richer.
Got it.
And then another interesting thing about Traminer is that even in the dry styles, you often get this subtle perception of sweetness.
Really? Even if it's technically a dry wine?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's kind of cool, right?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, so it's not like a sugary sweetness,
Right.
but it's just like this hint of sweetness that kind of rounds out the wine.
Okay. Well, what about the acidity?
So acidity is typically like moderate to low,
Okay.
which is kind of a key thing to remember.
Yeah.
Because if you compare it to some other white grapes that are known for being really acidic,
Yeah.
Traminer is definitely on the lower end of the spectrum.
Mm.
And that's part of what contributes to that like rounder, sometimes richer mouthfeel that you get.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about like the aroma, the taste, the texture, the acidity.
Right.
What about the different styles of Traminer wines? Because it seems like there's quite a range.
Yeah, there is a pretty big range.
Yeah.
You can find everything from like those bone-dry, food-friendly wines,
Right.
all the way to like dessert wines that are super sweet.
Okay. And it sounds like Gewürztraminer is kind of like the most intense of them all.
Yeah, usually Gewürztraminer is going to be the most aromatic and expressive.
Yeah.
But again, it's all about the terroir and the winemaking, right? So
Right.
like even within that Gewürztraminer category, you can still find a lot of variation.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all those different styles, it sounds like Traminer would be pretty versatile when it comes to food pairing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is where it really shines.
Okay.
Like you've got that aromatic intensity.
Yeah.
And then you've got that potential for sweetness. And those two things together make it like super adaptable at the dinner table.
So what are some of the like classic pairings?
Okay, so spicy Asian cuisine is like a no-brainer.
Yep, that makes sense.
Right, because those aromatic notes and that hint of sweetness, they can really like tame the heat,
Yeah.
and they can also like enhance the spices.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's not just like fighting the spice.
Right.
It's actually like working with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like this really cool synergy.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then it's not just about spicy food either.
Okay.
You can also pair it with like aromatic cheeses,
Okay. Like what?
like Munster.
Munster. All right.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Interesting.
And then, richer dishes like foie gras, especially with like a sweeter style of Traminer.
Okay.
That's a classic pairing.
Yeah.
And then even some desserts can work really well.
Okay. What kind of desserts?
So like fruit-based desserts or desserts that have like spice notes,
Okay.
those are usually good bets.
Cool. So basically, it seems like the key is to just think about the aromas in the wine.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Like if you're trying to figure out what to pair with Traminer, just think about the aromas and then try to find dishes that either have like similar aromas or aromas that will complement or contrast in an interesting way.
Got it. Okay, cool. So let's wrap up by talking about Traminer's place in the wine world.
Okay.
So, like, where does it stand today, and like, what might the future hold for it?
Okay, so one thing that's really important to mention is the role of DOC systems.
Okay, what are those?
So DOC stands for Denomination of Origin Controlled.
Okay.
And these systems, they're basically in place to like protect the quality and the typical characteristics of wines from specific regions.
Okay.
So like in Alsace and Alto Adige, they have these DOCs for a Traminer.
Okay.
And what that means is that there are all these rules about like which grapes can be used, how much wine can be produced, and all sorts of other stuff. And the idea is to make sure that when you buy a bottle of Traminer from one of those regions,
Yeah.
you know that it's going to be a high quality wine that really represents that region.
Okay, so it's all about like preserving the tradition and the quality.
Exactly.
And then it sounds like there are a lot of winemakers around the world who are really dedicated to making great Traminers.
Yeah, there are some really talented people out there.
Yeah.
Not just in those classic regions, but also in Germany and Austria and in the New World.
Okay.
And they're all doing really interesting things with this grape.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool to see.
So it sounds like Traminer is in good hands.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's not all sunshine and roses, right?
Right.
There are some challenges that it faces.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges is just like general market competition.
Okay.
You know, there are a lot of different wines out there vying for people's attention.
Yeah.
And then another challenge is that a lot of people still think that all Traminer is sweet.
Really?
Yeah, and that's just not true.
Right.
Like we talked about, there are all these different styles.
Yeah.
From dry to sweet.
So that's like a misconception that needs to be cleared up.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think the future holds for Traminer?
You know, I think the future's actually pretty bright.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, people are getting more and more adventurous with their wine choices. Like
Yeah.
they're looking for something different, something interesting, something aromatic.
Yeah.
And Traminer really fits the bill.
Yeah, totally. And it sounds like things like enotourism,
Right?
where people can go and like visit these wine regions.
Yeah,
And actually experience Traminer where it's made.
exactly.
That could be really helpful.
I think so.
And then also just like educating people about the different styles.
Yeah, yeah. Like getting the word out there
Yeah.
that Traminer is not just one thing,
Right.
that it's this whole spectrum of flavors and styles.
Totally. Okay, well, this has been a really cool deep dive into Traminer.
Yeah.
It's definitely a grape with a lot to offer.
Oh.
So is there anything else that you think our listeners should know about it?
You know, I think the best thing that people can do is just go out and try some Traminer.
Yeah.
And if you really want to like geek out on it,
Yeah.
try getting a bottle from Alsace and a bottle from Alto Adige
Okay.
and taste them side by side.
Interesting.
Yeah, because that'll really show you how the terroir can impact the same grape.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then, you know, next time you're having dinner, just be a little adventurous
Okay.
and try pairing Traminer with something that you wouldn't normally think of.
Yeah.
You might be surprised at how well it works.
Awesome advice.
Hmm.
Okay, well, I'm definitely going to go out and find some Traminer now.
Yeah, me too.
This has been great. Thanks for all the info.
Yeah, no problem. This was fun.
Cool. All right, well, that's it for this deep dive into Traminer. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
Bye.